I say 10:15.
Come on, don't keep us up.
Don't look at me. There's budget stuff and. Okay. Welcome to our City Council meeting for March 13th. City Attorney, do we have anything to report out from our closed session?
No.
Okay. Madam Clerk? Oops. Roll call?
The record will show that all members are present.
Okay. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance followed by the invocation given tonight by Rabbi Mark Rubenstein of the Temple Isaiah. And if Councilmember Selich would lead us in the pledge.
Please follow me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing.
O Lord, we are assembled here tonight to deal with matters that concern our community. O Lord our God, we are all servants in your name. You teach us to number our days according to your law, that we may acquire a heart of wisdom. O Lord, let us use wisdom tonight. Let us respect the feelings of our neighbor and think of the general good. Let us remember, O Lord, that the word community stands for common unity, and that we are all here for a similar purpose, to bring morality, ethics, peace, and social justice to our community, to our state, to our country, and to all the other nations of the world. We seek to do this. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Rubenstein. Okay, we have one presentation tonight. It's a proclamation to the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce on a century of service to Newport Beach. It is the Chamber's 100-year centennial. I guess they were formed about, a year after our city was formed. And they've been working very hard for us ever since. I have a proclamation here to read. Is there someone here to accept it tonight? Okay. Would you come forward? You can both come forward. Richard's not here tonight? Why don't you state your name for the record?
My name is Joe DuBois. I'm the chairman of the board for the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, Joe.
Hey, my name is Jeff Parker. I'm the vice president of the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce.
And I'll just read it from up here, I guess. Whereas on March 12, 1907, 16 men calling themselves the Harbor Boosters established the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce, each contributing $5 to cover the initial expenses of the first commercial body formed in the city. And whereas in 1927, the Balboa and Newport Beach Chambers merged to form the Newport Harbor Chamber of Commerce, and whereas over the years the Chamber has not only concerned itself with our community's harbor, industrial, and municipal matters, but has initiated and sponsored various celebrations and civic events which are essential in a resort community, such as the 99th Annual Newport Beach Christmas Boat Parade, the 46th Annual Sandcastle Contest, and the 19th Annual Taste of Newport. And whereas in 1962, the Commodore's Club was formed to provide leadership, organization, and fundraising support on business, social, and community special events. And whereas in 2001, the Chamber's official name was changed to the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce to better reflect the marketability of the Newport Beach name for its members. And whereas the mission of the Chamber is to promote economic opportunity through business and community leadership and to enhance the social and civic environment of Newport Beach, the Chamber has grown to a business organization of almost 1,000 members, representing over 25,000 employees. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Steve Rosansky, Mayor of the City of Newport Beach, on behalf of the entire Newport Beach City Council, do hereby proclaim March 12, 2007, as Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce Century of Service to Our Community Day in the City of Newport Beach. Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Excellent job you folks do.
If I may.
You may.
And of course, first of all, I'd say as a lawyer, you've got to like all the whereases in the proclamation. But I would just like to say a few words this evening. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm pinch hitting tonight for President Richard Luers. He's a little bit under the weather tonight and cannot be with us. But it's a pleasure to be here with all of you and to acknowledge the Chamber's century of service to the community. Not insignificantly, Richard is also celebrating an anniversary. This will be his 25th year at the helm of the Chamber. And I think that is significant from the standpoint of it represents a constancy of vision and leadership for the Chamber when you consider that there have only been a handful of presidents of the Chamber throughout the 100 years. So that's one of the reasons I believe that the Chamber has been so effective, and we're grateful for his leadership and his continuing leadership at the Chamber, especially for a volunteer like myself who gets the opportunity to work with him. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank and acknowledge the professional staff of the Chamber, including people like Jeff Parker here, the Vice President. It's been a great 100 years, and mindful as I am of the 100 years behind us as the Chamber of Commerce, I would also like to assure everybody that we're just as excited about embarking on our second century of service for the community, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with the community, both business and the residential areas, to make this a better city for all of us. So thank you again for recognizing the Chamber on this significant event.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do. Okay. Madam Clerk, notice to the public.
Notice to the public. The city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the council. Speakers must limit comments to 5 minutes on agenda items. The council has the discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones and pagers off or set them in the silent mode. This is the time for City Council announcements or matters which council members would like placed on a future agenda for discussion, action, or report.
Okay, tonight we'll start with Councilmember Henn.
I've been particularly fortunate in the last week to participate in a couple of tours on the peninsula, which is my district, for items of relevance to the peninsula. The first of which was to tour the junior lifeguard temporary facility that was just put in place, and to get a little tour and presentation of the overall lifeguard effort that's located on the peninsula, which is altogether, I think, an extraordinary effort. Rini Boyer, who runs the lifeguard program, the junior lifeguard program, was just named the Dorothy Palin Employee of the Year, and I think that was much deserved for the work that she does with 1,200 kids every year. Thousands upon thousands, I suppose, over the years, of children of residents of Newport Beach. I would like to also indicate, too, that we need seasonal lifeguards, and people should be encouraging anyone they know in that respect to apply for that. The other tour I had was the Balboa Theater. Mary Lonich took me through that and the plan for the Balboa Theater, which I think is a very important part of the regeneration of the Balboa Village area, a very worthy project that I hope moves forward smartly here as they are trying to get through the Coastal Commission. Lastly, I would like to thank our mayor, Steve Rosansky, for being the driver of the conference that we held on group homes on March the 2nd. It was an extraordinarily well done first step to help us address this issue on two parallel paths here. One, to lobby for changes in the law, which is the point of that conference, and the other to do what we can from the standpoint of local regulation that's appropriate for all. So, Steve, thank you. Well done.
Thank you. Keith?
Mr. Mayor, Assembly Bill 1355 was introduced on February 23rd by Assemblymember Houston, who is a Central Valley legislator. The bill would require that Harbor Patrol services be perennially provided by the Sheriff's Department. As you know, we're discussing with the county taking over ultimately potentially Harbor Patrol duties, and certainly we would want the flexibility to provide those services with our own fire or police personnel or other less costly services than the county Sheriff's Department. This is another example of legislation that drives government costs and makes them more expensive than they need to be. So I would like to ask staff to bring back a report at our next council meeting taking a position in opposition to AB 1355 and noticing all of our appropriate legislators and members of the County Board of Supervisors. And then finally, and just briefly, let me take this opportunity, because it doesn't happen a lot, to wish good luck to the Cal State Long Beach 49ers in the NC2A basketball finals. Go Niners, beat Tennessee.
Councilman Selich?
I have nothing.
Councilman Webb?
In line with what Councilmember Curry has mentioned, should that be a letter, or should we be having a resolution that we pass?
I think we would pass a resolution, and then we would also send a letter with a copy of the resolution to all of our legislators and county supervisors.
It would seem like that we also should involve all the beach communities up and down the coast.
That would be an excellent suggestion.
Okay.
Certainly the ones that have harbors.
Well, I don't know. Livermore has a few, don't they? Actually, was it Friday or Thursday that we were over at Newport Elementary School? Arbor Day. Yesterday.
Monday.
Or Monday, excuse me. Gosh, my time flies. Anyway, yesterday it was at Newport Elementary School. The Rotary Club donated a tree to Newport Elementary and handed out little seedlings to the third graders, and it was really interesting to see the kids react and help plant the tree. And just remember that Newport Beach does have 40,000 trees and is a tree city, so we celebrate Arbor Day here all the time.
Councilwoman Daigle?
None, thank you.
Councilwoman Gardner?
Nothing.
I have several things just to add a little bit to what Councilman Henn said about the group home conference that we had last Friday, and thank you again for your kind words. We did manage to attract over 300 attendees to that conference, and they came from over 100 different cities throughout the state. We had people from Chula Vista, National City, all the way up to Eureka come to the conference. It was, I thought, a very big success. You can't distract me with those laser pens. I thought it was a very big success, and I think even our city attorney and our code enforcement people learned some valuable information from the best practices section of the conference. So I hope good things will come out of it. I think the most eye-opening thing was that other cities saw that they weren't alone, that they do have a similar problem that Newport Beach has, and that hopefully if we band together that we can get some action at the state level. The next thing I wanted to mention was that the City Council will be having, I don't know if it's our first official retreat, but first one I ever heard about. We're going to be having a retreat, but we're not going up to Big Bear or Mammoth or anywhere like that. We're just going over to the Friends Room in the library on March 24th at 8:30. It'll start, and it'll probably go into the afternoon. The public is invited, and the topic of discussion is basically going to be council priorities for the next year and maybe next several years. And so I encourage anybody who's interested in knowing what the direction of our city will be in the near and short-term future, certainly come and listen. Last, on Thursday, March 15th, from 5 to 7 p.m., we'll be having our first meeting of the Intense Residential Occupancy Committee here in this room. And I encourage anybody from the public who wants to attend that. It is an open meeting. Please do come. There'll be a section for public comments. And all those of you who, and I see some out in the audience tonight, that have been looking for a forum in which to express your concerns about sober living, group home, residential treatment facilities, and other types of dense residential occupancies, this will be the place and time to do that. So I encourage you all to attend. Okay, moving on. Madam Clerk.
Consent calendar. All matters listed under consent calendar, items 1 through 17, and supplemental item 23, are considered by the council to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. The City Council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the Council votes on the motion unless members of the Council, staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and/or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Members of the public who wish to discuss a consent calendar item should come forward to the lectern upon invitation by the mayor, state their name and item number. If the optional sign-in card has been completed, it should be placed in the box provided at the podium.
Okay, we'll start with Councilwoman Gardner. Anything items you want to pull?
I'd like items 7 and 14, and I have a correction to the minutes. Do I just make that now, or do I have to pull the minutes?
Just make your correction.
Okay. On page 58, at the very last sentence on the page, it says, Councilmember Gardner said she might agree with statements regarding item D. No. I did not agree with that. I said that I would agree with Councilmember Webb. He wanted to have a presentation by the Toll Road Authority. I said that was fine as long as we had a presentation by the opposition as well.
Councilwoman Daigle?
Number 11, number 14.
11 and 14?
Yeah, I think.
All right, Nancy already pulled that one. Councilmember Webb?
I have none.
Councilmember Henn?
None.
Councilmember Curry?
No items to pull, just to recognize item number 9. I'm very excited about being the commencement of the study to restructure the Oasis and redesign the Oasis facility. I think that's a tremendous community accomplishment that ought to be recognized tonight.
Mayor Pro Tem Selich?
Nothing.
Okay, and I have item number 8. And that's it, item number 8. Does the staff have any items that they'd like to pull?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to actually ask for a continuation of item number 10. That's professional services agreement with EIP Associates, to bring that back at the next meeting.
Thank you, Homer. Okay, does the public have any items that they would like to pull? Seeing no one, bring it back for a motion.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar with the exceptions of 7, 8, 11, and 14, and the continuation of number 10.
Second.
Wait, and the change to the minutes?
And the change to the minutes, yes, sir.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Motion carries.
Okay, very good. All right, I guess item 7 is first. Councilwoman Gardner?
Yes, this is on the proposed assessment district on Pacific Drive in Crone Del Mar, and I've received several phone calls from concerned residents, and I wanted to get some clarification and answers for those who couldn't come tonight but are perhaps watching on the television. So who will be answering my questions on this?
It depends upon what your questions are. We have some people from the electrical company and also Richard Arsenio.
Okay.
Patrick
Patrick.
Arsenio.
I butchered that one.
One of the questions I have is about the notice given, so that would be the city's responsibility, both for the meeting that took place in February and then what notice went out as far as that this would be on the agenda tonight.
Mayor and council members. We had sent we held a homeowner information meeting on February 20th, and I sent you an email earlier this morning regarding, we mailed out that notice on February 6th, so 2 weeks prior to the meeting, to all homeowners within that district.
And did you notice people as far as the meeting tonight? Was that at that meeting, or did you also do a follow-up mailing?
I did a follow-up meeting on Friday of last week regarding tonight's meeting. Although we did discuss it at our homeowner meeting, we had a PowerPoint presentation, and one of the slides there did have the schedule of tonight's meeting, the public hearing, and also the balloting procedures. And if the district is formed, the eventual cash collection period and sale of bonds.
Yeah. And then the other question I had, and I don't know that you would necessarily answer this, but there was a surprise among some of them that the costs were what they are, considerably more than I think a lot of people had initially considered. And the question has been, is it because the district is so small? If the assessment district was larger, would the costs per capita go down?
In the past, we've tended to see smaller districts have higher assessments, but with the cost of construction going up in recent years and the way these districts are now paid using prevailing wage instead of a lower contractor rate, we've seen the costs go up significantly. And we have two districts that are getting ready to go to preliminary approval this year. This is a small district, and the costs are higher. But the next district coming up is considerably bigger. It's probably just shy of 200 lots, and it's in the mid-20s as far as preliminary assessments.
And has there been any change in the proposed assessment district since the 62% passed? Yeah. Huh? Yeah, since that petition was brought forward.
Has there been any change in
the boundaries?
In the boundaries? There's been an addition of some lots along the Acacia Street.
At their request?
No, it was at the suggestion of the assessment engineer and city staff. Based on the reasoning is that when the overhead utilities are underground along Acacia, those properties that front Acacia are going to benefit from the improved aesthetics of the community, and so they were assessed an aesthetic portion.
Which is smaller?
Which is very small. Okay. The average assessment for those lots is around $2,000 to $3,000. So they're just being charged like 1/4 of the full assessment, which would be the remainder of the lots.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a comment on that, too, tagging on to what Councilwoman Gardner said, because I've talked about this before. This is a very small district, and even if the cost is roughly the same as a 200-home district, the part of the issue here is staff time, and I imagine that it takes time, whether you're building, I only counted 37 lots. Maybe I was wrong, or I don't know how you do the actual number, but
I believe that's right, 37.
37 homes. I mean, if we're going to piecemeal the city 37 homes at a time, I mean, it's obviously going to be a lot more staff-intensive. I know, like, for instance, they're doing the one in Newport Shores. That's 400 or 500 homes, and across the street is 700 or 800 homes.
Right.
I mean, and Balboa Island is like 2,000 homes, isn't it?
Balboa Island is about 1,400 to 1,500.
Okay, 1,400 to 1,500. I mean, those are numbers that make sense. But to do these little undergrounding districts, in my mind, doesn't make sense. And I've mentioned this before. The last time we had it, and we had one that I think was voted down on the peninsula not too long ago, about 2 years ago, because when the final numbers came in, the people were, they balked at the price, which was even less than this is today. And so, I don't know what it involves, and maybe it's not, obviously, it's probably not your problem to solve, but we need to set some kind of a standard here in the city for the size of these districts. I mean, it's one thing if those are the only homes there and you can't underground anybody else, but I could see that there's other telephone poles just backing right onto these homes that, we could have easily included other streets into the district.
The original district, when it was presented to staff, was bigger. But it fell apart because the people didn't want to sign the petition based on the cost, because it is an expensive district, even if it's made larger. So over the years, I went back and forth with a proponent looking at different sizes. Should we increase it all the way north to Coast Highway? Should we try and include extra blocks? And it never moved forward because of the cost. And so it just kind of went on the shelf for probably a year or two. And then another proponent came forward by the name of Barbara Gladman, and she was able to get people to sign on with this new proposed small area, knowing that it was going to be expensive. I started out up front telling her that this was going to be a very expensive project, and she was able to get the community support, and they had 62% certified as in favor of moving forward.
Well, certainly in the other district, they had, I don't remember what it was. It was more than 50%. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten to a vote, obviously.
Right.
And it probably was more than 50%. But, when it comes to casting, it's one thing to have a person show up at your front door and ask you to sign something, and a lot of people will do that regardless of, or whatever. But when it comes to voting in your own home, that sometimes is, or coming down here and casting a vote, it's another story. I guess what I'm saying is, I will vote in support of this thing because obviously the residents there want it, and they can decide ultimately whether they're going to go forward. But I think that we need to come up with some criteria to make these assessment districts somewhat bigger. For anybody listening or out in the audience, they're doing this where I live, and it's the best thing that ever happened. When those polls came down, it was like night and day. And the money it's cheap money when you compare it to what we have invested in our homes. So I recommend anybody to do it. I'm kind of surprised that the people to the north, or I imagine it was the north, we're not willing to. But certainly I think as a city, when we have to look at staff time and resources, dealing with these little districts on a piecemeal basis, and obviously I just said you spent a lot of time going back and forth with these people. And so, we really need to, I think, go with larger districts. Anybody else have any comments on this? Okay, I'll open it up to the public. Somebody in the public, come forward. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Jerry Ostrowski, and I'm a member of that district number 94. And I'm one of those people that are not in favor of it. Primarily, first of all, I think it's important to note that Barbara Gladman, who pushed for this, no longer lives in the district. So the benefit would not be accruing to her. Secondly, I think the cost is not trivial. And certainly from an aesthetic standpoint, excuse me, from an aesthetic standpoint, the remaining poles are still there. If we had a recommendation, we would say, let's do it for all of Corona Del Mar and improve the whole area. And maybe there would be some economies of scale. But to do it for such a small district, significant dollars, and I'll still see the poles, I'm not for it.
Thank you, sir. If you'd like to speak on this matter, just come on up.
Well, Ms. Gardner, I appreciate my name's Scott Cameron. I'm a teacher at Ensign Junior High School, and I am here on behalf of Melody Orr, who's in the audience. And we sat around talking about this, and your questions and your comments are, and frankly, as well as yours. I'd love to have him answer some of the questions that I have. They're somewhat rhetorical, but let me just propose some questions that I would have, and maybe somebody can help us out with these questions so we can get some answers. Number one, I'm not sure who proposes these assessment districts. I mean, who's the driving train that gets this done initially? Was it Ms. Gladman that started this thing, and all of a sudden she's no longer here? Don't know, but it starts and has kind of legs on its own. It just keeps going. And why is the proposed assessment district limited to the proposed boundaries? I mean, why are some houses included and some are not? This interesting, I guess, gerrymandering or however, whatever the word is. And why couldn't it be larger as long as it's being proposed? Or conversely, can't it be smaller? If the power poles on Pacific Drive and up Acacia are aesthetically displeasing, then why aren't the poles on First Avenue and the rest of the city similarly displeasing? Why are we looking at a piecemeal approach? Thanks, Mayor, for picking that one up. It's a piecemeal approach and not a more inclusive citywide approach to this problem. Have the economics of a citywide power pole removal plan been analyzed? Is it possible that there's a per household cost that could be more affordable if all the CDM residents were involved? Has anybody done that analysis? And why does this vote, that we're supposedly involved in some kind of a vote, why is there a majority that have to protest it? When someone is here trying to get it approved, why shouldn't the majority, and I don't know what majority means, if there's 31 lots, why shouldn't they have to get the majority to vote in for it, for the proposal, as opposed to having the other side come up with a majority of negative votes? So I propose those questions that we'd love to get some answers and don't know who we talk to or where we go from here. But he's probably the right guy to help us.
You're exactly right. Those are very good questions, and I'm sure if you contact Patrick, and maybe Patrick will pass you his card.
Or maybe Mayor Rosinski, the city attorney, she can discuss how we do the mechanisms.
I'd like to make one little comment on this. It's been something that Newport Beach probably has done more utility assessment districts than any other city in the state. We have started the process 35 years ago. Those areas that have above-ground utilities are the older areas of the community. The areas that don't have above-ground utilities have already paid in the purchase of their houses for the undergrounding of the utilities. And so the question comes up quite often, why doesn't the entire city pay for undergrounding everybody else's utilities? Well, the main reason is because those that don't have it have already paid for it, and they shouldn't be assessed or charged for the having to underground other areas. I think that I agree with you. It's nice to have larger districts. I remember the district from the West Newport district. It literally took close to 7 or 8 years to get 50% of the petitions in because it was so large.
It was longer than that.
Maybe 10, 12 years.
Yeah, it was like 15.
But at any rate, in some instances, the residents that are really interested in having their utilities undergrounded will sometimes settle for a higher price and a smaller district just to get the work done a little bit more rapidly. Yes, it would be more economical to expand and get it as large as you can. It's something that the city has asked when petitions are circulated that you get at least 60% of the residents to sign the petition. And the main reason for that is because many times when we've relied on 50%, when all of the work is done, the money is spent to get the plans and everything else done, if you only have 50%, it only takes one person to sink the district after you've gotten the work done, and you have a lot of out-of-pocket expense. So that normally if you get 62%, very rarely does that 12% totally reverse. It's not a perfect process, but it's something that has worked very well for a lot of areas within the community, and if this particular district has people that do not like it in the majority, then it won't go forward. But I think that Patrick has had the meeting, and these type of questions need to come up in those meetings to where they can be answered and discussed in as much detail as possible. So, excuse me for interrupting.
No problem. That's fine. But I would encourage you to contact Patrick, and he probably can answer a lot of those questions for you. Councilwoman Gardner?
Patrick, you said that at the February meeting you had a good turnout for one of these presentations, higher numbers than you usually get.
Right. Typically for a district, we'll get less than 10% of the people to show up. In this district, we had 37 properties, and we had about 15-plus people there that signed in to our sign-in sheet.
And the reaction, did you get a mixed reaction from them, or were these all proponents, or did you have any sense of that?
Talking to my consultants that work with me on this project, I thought we had a very positive meeting. We had some questions afterwards. We have an open forum after our presentation, and we got some questions, but it seemed mostly positive. We didn't have a very negative feeling coming out of the meeting. It seems over the past week I've been getting more and more questions as we get closer to this meeting, and I don't know. I thought we had a pretty solid project back in February. And I just wanted to make a mention about the proposed gerrymandering. Staff does not come up with the boundary of the district. We get a request in from a proponent, from a resident, and they give us an outline of an area. We provide the petitions and say, have at it. Come back to us when you have 60%. So, we don't in-house decide who's going to be in the district or not. We work with it. We send it to the utilities for their final approval, but it comes from the residents in their petition.
Patrick, as far as the question about why don't you have a majority of people as opposed to a majority of protest, isn't that part of the state law as far as it's directed on how the procedure is directed on how the city has to handle it?
That's correct, and if you have further questions, I would refer to Bob Hessel, our bond counsel, who can answer all of your assessment district questions in detail.
Councilman Selich?
Yeah, Patrick, one of the questions that was asked me by a couple of people that hasn't been answered tonight is how do they go about getting the estimate for the private hookup to their home before they actually vote on this? Because some folks have indicated that depending what the cost is, that might affect their decision to vote for or against the district.
Typically, we don't address that till after the district is formed. What we'll do is we'll send out a notice to each homeowner in the district, and what we advise is we have it's pretty informational letter. It has step by step what to do, and we suggest getting estimates from 3 different contractors and talking to your neighbors or community members who have gone through this before to get a good idea of what you should be paying to do your private property conversion.
Do you know what these are typically running? Because, it could be an expensive proposition for someone on top of the assessment district. I mean, sometimes these things can run more than the cost of the assessment, I understand.
I'm not aware of that, but a typical private property conversion, I would have to base it on a lot on the peninsula, because that's where we've done most of our work. Those are rather small lots, so what we've seen is between $1,500 to maybe $5,000 max what it would cost to do the private property work.
Yeah.
Here in this district, we have some lots that are much deeper, maybe twice to 2.5 times as big as what we see on the peninsula, so the cost is going to be greater. What that cost is, I don't know. I don't have an average for those.
Yeah. A lot of it depends on where your meter's located on your building. Like my house had a dirt strip on the side, so they just ran it in the dirt. Sometimes you have to upgrade your electrical panel. A lot of the older homes, there's a cost. But I know I paid about $3,000 to have it done on a property that I own, that they put a whole new panel in and ran it about 15 feet or maybe 20 feet from the center of the alleyway. But yeah, if you've got like fancy paving and things like that, it can get very expensive to replace it. Okay. Anybody else from the public that would like to comment on this matter? Seeing no one, do I have a motion, Councilman?
Move the recommended action.
Second.
All in favor?
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 8. I called this one up, this State Conservancy Grant Agreement and Ground Leases. Who's handling that? Dave?
Yes, Dave Giff will come forward.
Hi, Dave.
Mr. Mayor?
I don't really need an explanation of the item. I pretty well understand it, but basically what we're doing is we're talking about entering into a ground lease with Department of Fish and Game and then a subsequent sublease for a portion of the property. My issue with this is, and the attorney in me says that we don't have a copy of the ground lease here, and we're basically approving a ground lease that we've never seen. And so my question is there any reason is there something imminent that needs to be done, or can we at least put off, I think it was recommendation number 2, until we actually have the ground lease?
Mr. Mayor, you could indeed put that one off. The more critical things are the other items, as well as, I would point out, though, that we're encouraging you to execute a sublease to property that you haven't seen the ground lease on. This is a long,
that worries me too, Dave, believe me.
This is a long, the sublease would be contingent upon the ground lease.
Well, and
too long a story that you don't want to get into tonight about getting Fish and Game to actually produce the ground lease for your approval.
I'm sure it's difficult.
If you were
Tell me buy a fishing license if they give it to you or something.
After we've provided the ground lease to them already. It's already drafted.
I had my fill of dealing with the state on the Sunset Ridge Park property, so I can sympathize with you. But that being said, I'd still prefer not to approve an action until I actually saw the document. The sublease at least says it's contingent on entering into a lease, so I feel comfortable that as long as we have a lease, we can go ahead and sublease. But or if we don't get the lease, then we're not bound by the sublease.
That's correct.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comment on that item? Anybody from the public like to comment on this matter? Okay, I'll bring it, public comments are closed. I'll bring it back. I'll make a motion to adopt recommendations 1, 3, 4 and 5, and, but not number 2. All in favor?
Motion carries.
Okay. 10 is pulled. Okay, item number 11, memorandum of understanding with the Lifeguard Management Association. Councilwoman Daigle, I believe you pulled that one?
On this particular item, our city council is working very constructively together on long-term fiscal initiatives and looking at our expense structures and so on. So I believe we're all very committed to our fiscal well-being. My concern with this particular item is that the pension benefits are going to have a fiscal impact beyond this year's budget or this particular group of employees. So I don't support the policy change, but again, I think that we're all committed to working together on the fiscal betterment of the city.
Anybody else that would like to make a comment on this item? I'll open up to the public. Is there anybody from the public who would like to comment on this item?
Dick Nichols from Corona Del Mar. This is a 3% at 50 wage increase for pensions, is my understanding. And it amounts to a 16% increase in pay without any increase in yearly pay, which they are getting anyway, if all of it was paid by the city. Right now, I guess only 9% of that is paid right now. Our history has been that within 2 years, we'll be paying the whole thing. So it's a huge pay increase, which is basically going for the ability of the lifeguards, which are only the supervisors, and those supervisors only work 5 months a year, typically. I mean, they're on the staff the whole time, but they don't have assigned duties most of that time. So I really am not sure that this makes sense. We were able to keep this from happening when I was on the council, but I don't expect that to happen now. They put up too many signs for too many people. I do hope that we have some justification for this, because it is a huge, this is what bankrupted San Diego. This is what's caused bankruptcies or close to it in Orange County now, and this is what the very same numbers are causing us problems, where our payroll is the huge amount in everything that we do in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to comment related to the supervisors only working 5 months a year. I'm sure those teenagers that were pulled out of the rip current by those supervisors, was it yesterday, are very appreciative that they were around to do the rescue.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council. I would like to make my own comment on it. I do agree as well that the council in the past has kind of held the line on the 3% at 50 for the lifeguards, and I'm not in favor of that term of the contract, and therefore I will be voting against the contract. I think the 3% at 50 in general was given to public safety people at a time when the stock market was rising. The cost of funding these plans was very low, or zero, actually, I think is how it was sold. But as we all know, the stock market crashed. Returns on the PERS fund became negative, and now we're paying not only what we would have paid had we not gone to 3% of 50, we're paying more for that, but we're also paying for the 3% of 50 now, which was basically sold at the time as a freebie for the city. And so I think the tide basically is turning in the state as far as giving enhanced pension benefits, and I just don't think that this is the appropriate time to be moving against that trend. So with that being said, do I have a motion?
I move the recommended action. Second.
Please vote.
With Mayor Rosansky and Councilmember Daigle voting no, the motion carries.
Okay. Okay, let's move to item number 14. Councilwoman Gardner, you pulled that one?
I have two concerns on this issue. One is a letter that we just received from the Irvine Company, and then also concerns about the precedent we're setting, because it says that we have a general policy of not allowing private sponsors of events and that sort of thing, and I'm concerned. Have we done this before, allowed companies to appear on any banner?
We have in the past. I think they've appeared on chamber banners and Taste of Newport.
Okay.
In addition, we are a sponsor of this event as well. The city
No, I understand that. I just was asking about the precedent. But I do have a question. Robin, what about this letter?
And Mike, I question the letter too, because this is the first time the Irvine Company has given us something like this. I'm questioning why they didn't give us the same type of letter for the Taste of Newport.
I think I may know the answer to that. The city has recently, I think the staff has recently noticed that there's quite a few polls within, I think, Fashion Island, and there may be some other areas. I don't know all the details of it because I know Aaron's been working on it more directly, that became rusted, and they had to be taken down, and the city has to replace them. And the Irvine Company, these particular poles had designed or desired a certain kind of pole, and I think they paid to put them in, but the city was still responsible for maintaining them. And so I don't even know whether the disclaiming the liability is relevant to this extent that I think the city may already be liable for any impact on those poles. I think the issue was how much it costs to replace them. In other words, we're already responsible for all the light poles in the city.
We are, but there's a special agreement on that particular area having to do with, I think, primarily the painting of the poles, because the Irvine Company wanted the poles painted white.
Right.
And they're galvanized poles, and it's very difficult to do that. The city got them to pay for that. I was under the impression they were also maintaining the poles, too. But
that's not what I heard recently when we had this discussion of whether they were maintaining them. I think it was more a matter of that they paid to have the more expensive ones or the different style put in, and also to paint them, and that there was some requirement for that. But I think the overall responsibility for the light poles are the cities, because they're in the cities right away.
Robin, let me see if there's any other staff members. Lloyd,
do you know anything about it? Yeah.
Because I guess my understanding is differently, that the Irvine Company did say that they would maintain the poles. I would point out, and you've probably already seen this, that the film festival would have to sign a hold harmless statement holding the city harmless, and that also item number 4, as far as the conditions, is the applicant must obtain a minimum of $1 million liability insurance. Just to point that out to you.
Well, I'm somewhat concerned because the Irvine Company has actually consulted the manufacturer of the pole, and this gives us constructive notice that they feel that they are not designed to handle the banners, and if that's the case, we shouldn't be allowing them to be installed on those poles unless we get a clarification from the manufacturer that the design is actually adequate.
I think that the issue with this is that this literally just was dropped on our desk this evening, so I haven't had a chance, and I don't think staff has had a chance to look at this, and I don't know what the past issue has been with regards to those poles overall because of the rust and the need for them to be replaced. So maybe this needs to be continued.
Yeah,
I think it needs to be continued.
Okay. I'd make the motion to continue the item.
Are the only places the poles being installed on the ring is on the 40 light poles in the ring road?
Second.
Yes, there are 80 poles, and I think they are all in the Fashion Center area.
But won't the film festival also be putting banners throughout the city? Not just that one spot?
I don't think so. I think it's limited to 80 poles.
I think it's 80 banners on 40 poles.
No problem. Yeah, the one issue we have, though, with continuing it is that our next meeting is the 27th. I think they wanted to start hanging these things the 29th. I don't know that the banners are printed or not printed, or whether we'll maybe not print them if we don't approve it. I don't know if there's any kind of potential to give the staff some kind of discretion as far as whether or not it would be safe to put these banners on the pole?
Well, I suppose the approval could be for all other poles other than the poles identified in this letter until such time as the city attorney's office and the utility staff has an opportunity to review the letter and determine whether it would be appropriate or safe for them to go on the poles.
It's utilities or public works? Or?
I think utilities works on,
Okay.
deals
I
with the
would
poles.
support that.
Well, I just want to point out that the time period is longer than the maximum allowed. We're making an exception there.
Yeah,
so
they're
if they
already
do have to
asking for
delay a
2
bit,
days
they would
more.
still be within
I understand,
period.
but if we approve it on the 27th, I mean, I don't know how long it takes to print banners and things like that, or get them hung. I mean, you know,
Mr. Mayor, I would offer a substitute motion to give staff discretion based on the advice of the city attorney to proceed with this if they determine that it's appropriate to do so, given the constraints that we're operating under. I think whether it's the film festival or the Taste of Newport or the Race for the Cure or the, all the other community events that help make Newport Beach special, those banners help develop a sense of community and notice for those events that I think is very important, and I'd like to see us continue if we at all can.
Yeah, and I also want to make sure that if they are maintaining them, that we aren't doing something that we might not need to work with them on changing the rules under the agreement that we had with them. So I don't want to negate that either.
That's fine, I'll support that.
Okay, well, why don't we open this up to public comment? Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak on this matter? Seeing no one? Okay, why don't we vote? We'll be voting on the alternative motion first, which is Councilman Curry's motion.
With Councilmember Webb voting no, the motion carries.
That completes our consent calendar. Okay. Okay, we move to our public hearing section of the meeting. First item is item 18, which I believe staff was asked to continue.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, do we have a motion for continuance?
So moved. Second.
Does anybody from the public like to comment on this matter? Seeing no one, please vote.
Motion carries.
Item number 19, commercial solid waste collection, award of non-exclusive solid waste collection franchise to franchisees. Someone giving a staff report on this?
Yes, Mark Harmon will provide a staff report. Earlier today, there was some discussion on this issue as far as reviewing some provisions of the franchise agreement. So, Mark, maybe we should provide some information for people in the audience and who are watching, and then open it up for council for any questions.
Great. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Mark Harmon. We did give an overview of this franchise, commercial solid waste franchise system today at 4 o'clock. There were 2 changes recommended. Staff is recommending an increase in the term to 10 years and a graduated increase in the diversion level, starting year 1, 50%, to year 6 at 55%. Staff agrees with those changes, and we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, does council have any questions? Councilman Daigle?
I would just make the motion to move the item as recommended staff with the 2 additional changes. And thanks again, Mark, for all your help working this out.
Okay, anybody else like to make comment, questions? Open it up to the public. Seeing no one, bring it back for a vote.
Motion carries.
Okay, this next item, number 20, because it wasn't publicly noticed properly, are we still voting to continue it, or? Yes, okay. Item number 20 is the Newport Beach Brewing Company, review of use permit number 3485-2920 Newport Boulevard. Apparently, this item was not properly noticed, and therefore we will be continuing it and entertaining a discussion on it at our next meeting on March 27th. So do I have a motion for continuance?
Move that we continue the item. Second.
Anybody from the public that would like to comment on this item? Seeing no one, please vote.
Motion carries.
Public comments? Madam Clerk?
Public comments are invited on non-agenda items generally considered to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record.
Is there anybody who would like to make a public comment on a non-agenda item?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor Rosansky and members of the City Council. I'm Shirley Conger, and I live in Corona Del Mar. I'm here to speak about the costs to the city of paying for health care. These costs have been rising steadily, perhaps 2 or 3 times the rate of inflation. At your last meeting, you adopted a legislative platform encouraging the state and federal governments to improve the current health care system. There are several health care bills being considered now in Sacramento and in Washington. Before we look at these proposals, I want to share some information with you. And I have a slide here with an overhead projector. And I'd like to... Thank you. This is a table from the New England Journal of Medicine, and it's on... Okay, thanks. It's comparative health costs of different countries, and it says of 2003. And the first item, one at the bottom, is the United States. And in 2003, the United States spent 15% of its gross domestic product on health care. That was everything, Medicare, Medicaid, workman's compensation, private insurance, et cetera. And at that time, life expectancy in the U.S. was 77.2 years. And let's compare that to the United Kingdom, which is the next above that. And in 2003, the United Kingdom spent 7.7% of its gross domestic product, but they lived a year and 3 months longer on an average than Americans did. Let's look at the top item, Canada. They spent 9.9% of their gross GDP, and they live about 2.5 years longer than Americans do. France spends 10.1% of GDP. Here again, they live about 2 years longer, the French do, than Americans. Germany spends 11% of GDP on health care. They live about a little over a year longer than Americans. Italy, 8.4%, about 60% what Americans do, of their GDP, and they live, 2.5 years longer than Americans. Japan spends only 7.9% of its GDP, and they live 4.5 years longer than Americans do. Why the difference? All of these other countries, except the United States, have a single-payer universal health care system. They pay less in taxes, obviously, much less, for better results. They have better health than Americans do. Why the difference?
Ms. Conger, your time's...
Okay. May I finish this? There is a bill which is in Sacramento and is devoted to single-payer health care, and I refer to Dr. Tobis for further.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Conger.
Mayor Rosansky, this is a follow-up of the remarks of Ms. Conger.
Can we have your name, please?
Tobis, a physician and professor at the University of California and the College of Medicine. I am also a resident of Newport Beach for 37 years. I'm here to urge you to support Senate Bill 840. This will reduce health care costs for employees and retirees of the city of Newport Beach. The cost of health insurance is going up 15 to 20% a year. The President and the Governor agree that we have a health care crisis. That crisis is the result of the health insurance industry,
with its enormous administrative overhead of some 25% in comparison to Medicare, which is a government program with an overhead of 3%. Our state legislature has passed a bill, SB 840, which the governor vetoed since his election contributions are supported heavily by the insurance industry. A new bill is being presented, and I urge the City Council to support it and perhaps sponsor it. It will provide health care for all and save the citizens of the state some $8 billion. Our present health care system leaves millions uninsured or underinsured. Any state program that involves the insurance industry is doomed to failure. The bill will reduce the costs of health care coverage for all the city employees and retirees, resulting in significant savings for the city budget. I urge the council to sponsor this legislation as Los Angeles and San Francisco have done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else that would like to make a comment on a non-agenda item?
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, my name is Philip Betancourt at 110 Newport Center Drive. As a Newport Coast resident, I wanted to personally extend my appreciation to Council members Gardner and Curry for their initiatives with the city staff recently on the traffic safety issues on Newport Coast Drive, and especially to thank Chief McDonough and the Police Department, as well as the California Highway Patrol, for their remote heavy vehicle inspection program, which they had in effect yesterday. And I can tell you around Newport Coast Elementary, the buzz is all good when neighbors see that in place. And secondly, on the 100th year anniversary, if I could put in a plug for the 36th anniversary breakfast next week of the Newport Beach Police Recognition Breakfast. As a former chamber director, but as the master of ceremonies, all of you that join us will be introduced personally as we salute this particular important group of first responders, and we care just as much about police and fire. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Betancourt, when is the date of that event?
Thursday the 21st, and it's 7:15 a.m., and I'm sure it'll be sold out.
It's in the morning.
Where is it going to be held?
Hold on, I want to say the Hyatt Regency this year. Yes, Hyatt Regency. City manager reminds me.
I think Thursday, Wednesday is the 21st is on a Wednesday.
21st is
Wednesday the
Wednesday.
21st.
Yes.
Wednesday the 21st. We hope to see you there.
Thank you, Phil.
And I'll take better notes next time. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. I'm Michael Titus of Jackson, DeMarco, Titus, and Peckinpah. I think all of you know I represent a number of your citizens, both in the peninsula and other areas of the city. I'm here to talk about the group home issue, but in particular, I'd like to ask three things. One is, we sent a letter yesterday about a moratorium. Second, I'd like to talk to you about an analysis the city should run about the number of people seeking to open these facilities in the near term. And finally, if we can get some sort of code enforcement report at the next meeting. Now, I want to talk about these three issues a little differently, even though they are intertwined. First, as you know from the conferences, and you've seen this map, a number of the residents are concerned of the proliferation of these group homes in close proximity to each other in areas where there's high density, 3 feet between the homes, between the group homes and the neighbors, and they would like to have a moratorium. The city's done this before. In fact, in 2005, you passed an emergency urgency ordinance which prevented the establishment and operation of medical marijuana dispensaries. This is not an uncommon thing, and this is exactly the reason and circumstances where this urgency ordinance would be applicable. Think about it. Right now, the city is trying to move the state to do something. Actively done it. Mayor Rosansky, members of the City Council, are pushing the state to modify the law, and we have met with the senators. It looks like something may happen by year end. The city itself wants to do an ordinance, but it's going to take 30 to 45 days to do it. In the interim, The neighbors believe, and our firm knows, that there are certain facilities that will be getting certificate of occupancy soon. They may be pulling electrical permits, mechanical permits, plumbing permits. What you need to do is put a moratorium on those permits. Now, you may ask, what happens if somebody suffers a tremendous hardship? Well, most urgency ordinances, I noticed your medical marijuana one didn't have it, have what's called a reasonable accommodation. That is, if somebody comes in for a permit for some type of group home, the city says no. You can keep track of those, and if some sort of reasonable accommodation has to be made, the city can review that. But at minimum, the city will know how many of these occur over the next 45 days, maybe longer if the moratorium gets pushed forward. This is a no-lose situation. If it turns out that there aren't very many coming forward, then obviously nobody's going to be affected by the moratorium, nobody's going to care. If there are a tremendous number who are, say 15 or 20 over the next 2 months, then the city will know that as well. That helps the analysis for the city. It helps the analysis for the city, both for their own city ordinance and for the state ordinance. I think it's important to recognize that that analysis helps determine what the city needs to do in evaluating its next move on the ordinances. Now, the last part is code enforcement. Mayor Zansky and the City Council did a wonderful job assembling people from all over the state to talk about this issue. The city attorneys in the Inland Empire have found that these homes, can we have another minute or two just to finish up?
30 seconds.
Sure. Have found that a number of these homes have to pull permits to do anything, so you can monitor them that way. They also found that a number of the homes didn't quite live up to what they should have done in taking care of those homes, and code enforcement went out there and was able to really find out, separate the good homes from the not-so-good homes. So code enforcement should give some kind of report to the meeting coming up on Thursday so that people in the community would understand what's going on and keep their eyes open, because the eyes and ears of the community will help code enforcement, but the community needs to know what code enforcement is doing. And with that, if you have any questions, we urge you to go ahead and pass the urgency ordinance. It requires 5 of you to do it. You've done it before. This isn't really that difficult. The findings you made in 2005 are the same findings you can make today.
Thank you, Mr. Titus. I would encourage you to attend our meeting on Thursday where we can more adequately address those issues.
Dick Nichols, Corona Del Mar. I too urge you to pass a moratorium on this. I think it's appropriate, and I also would like to ask you to reconsider the residential care ordinance that you put forth before. I don't think it was ever voted on a second time, though, was it? It was voted on. Okay, that seemingly is sabotaging some of the program in that it's essentially exempting any facility 6 and under, and that is not what the state law says. The state law says that you're exempting sober living facilities, and a sober living facility is only where they house the people, they get no money, and have no programs. And if the facilities that you're talking about, you're allowing program facilities, you're allowing anything 6 and under to qualify that way, and that's quite a difference. And it's not something that's minor. It's very, very big. And I think you want to recognize that and not penalize yourself. If you're truly trying to help on this residential care facility, then we need to properly consider those things. And if we had public input, I think that would have come out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Hi. Lori Morris, West Newport resident. I agree with Mr. Titus. I don't believe that a 45 days is not an unreasonable amount of time to ask the city to help resolve this critical issue. 45 days is extremely reasonable. It would let everyone at least catch their breath, get an idea of what's going on, and come back to this issue. We have so much to look at as far as this is concerned, so many layers involved here with the state, with the city, and we need the council to really give this deep consideration and enact this moratorium. And this is extremely urgent. There has been moratoriums enacted on other issues, just as Mr. Titus said. that, to me, aren't even as urgent, weren't as urgent as this one is, and I don't think it's unreasonable. I actually have come before you tonight. I have been here twice before. I requested in January 12th, 07, February 12th, 07, and I received a phone call March 28th, 07, about the conflict of interest paperwork that I have asked for repeatedly, obviously. I was told on March 28th that it was in the mail.
Is that February 28th?
February 20th, sorry. February 20th, I'm thinking ahead. But February 20th, received a phone call for Kathleen Walcott. She said that was in the mail. I phoned last Friday. They couldn't give me an answer. I couldn't get hold of anybody. I called Monday. Debbie, her assistant, said that she thought that it had gone into the mail. I have waited daily. There's been 13 postal days that have gone by, and I have still yet to receive it. These conflict of interest, asking for this, really, going 2.5 months and waiting for this is unreasonable. It's not that there is or is not conflicts. We don't know that, but the fact that the perception is out there that I'm not receiving these, that people know I'm not receiving these, there should be no reason not to get them in a reasonable amount of time. And that perception is bad for the city. It just makes it not look good that a resident is asking for something.
I need to address that perception, if I may.
Sure. Well, why don't we let Lori finish with her comments?
Okay, I'm almost done. But I realize that, I've talked to several people. They say that they're coming, but I just am asking again, requesting again, that we receive these in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you.
The first request was not for a Public Records Act request, the one in January. It was a demand for an investigation by our department. We did receive the formal Public Records Act request for the conflict of interest statements, and they were gathered and prepared. We have 10 days to do that. I think we got it around the 14th at the last meeting. It was asked of us. On the 28th, Kathy Wilcott had the information. She called Ms. Morris, let her know they were available. We had them. Did she want to come pick them up? Did she want us to come pick them up, or did she want us to mail them to her? We did not hear back, and I believe they were mailed out on Monday.
So, yesterday?
Okay, can I respond to that?
Well, this is not a time for responding back and forth.
Okay.
The information is ready?
Is it ready or mailed?
It was ready on February 28th. We called to let her know that. It was mailed out, I believe, on the 5th.
All right. I'm assuming that we kept a copy of it?
The copies are all in the clerk's office, so I didn't make a copy of all the conflict of interest statements for us to keep in our office.
All right. Excuse, 1 second, Don. If you don't receive them by, what's today, Tuesday, let's say Thursday, please call me, and I'll make sure that those copies are provided to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We made every effort to make sure that we got them to her as quickly as
We'll have them, in fact, at the meeting
possible.
so that you can pick them up, which I'm sure you'll be attending. I'm sure you will. Thank you, Lori.
Question to the city clerk.
Yes.
Can't somebody just go down and ask the city clerk to pull the file and look at them at the counter?
Yes, they can.
So that you could get that the same day, within minutes. All you have to do is go down and ask the city
Okay,
clerk to
well,
look at
we'll
it.
still provide them as we promised. Thank you. Anybody else that would like to make a public comment on a non-agenda item? Seeing no one, public comments section of this meeting is closed. Oh, you guys got to be quick.
I'm West Newport Beach also, and I'm part of the committee. We've been trying to do this rehab thing, and we really don't feel that it's unreasonable, the moratorium for 45 days. We would really like it ASAP and give us 45 days to group and find out where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Did you give us your name?
Ken Kuhlman. Ken Kuhlman.
Thank you, Ken.
39th Street.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice? Gone. Public comments is closed. Oral reports from City Council on committee activities. Does anybody have an oral report? We'll start with Councilmember Henn.
Nothing.
Report?
Selich?
On the General Plan Implementation Committee, we interviewed the consultants for the zoning code rewrite, and we will be bringing a contract to the council next meeting, next meeting for approval.
Thank you. And you have another meeting tomorrow?
Another meeting tomorrow.
Every 2 weeks. Councilwoman Gardner?
Nothing.
Councilwoman Daigle?
Just to add on the General Plan Committee, we also had the item this evening that was approved on the development agreement, developer agreement. I think we were ahead of schedule on that one.
Good, because I'm sure we'll fall behind schedule at some point in time.
No, the zoning code's 2 weeks ahead of schedule.
Okay,
right
there
now.
we go.
Good
I knew
job.
it was something. Good.
Good job, Ed. None, and I have none. Okay, Planning Commission agenda and oral status report.
Mr. Dave Lipo, Planning Director.
Mayor Rosansky, members of council, we had 4 items for the Planning Commission last week. The first was a request from Balboa Inn at 105 Main Street for a permit to have live entertainment and dancing. This was continued because we're still trying to work out some issues relative to the parking waiver and compliance with the requirements of the Coastal Act. Item number 3 was 30th Street Architects. This was a project for subdividing a lot at 2961 Cliff Drive. This was one of those wonderful opportunities for the Planning Commission to take a first pass at applying new policies from the new general plan to a real-life project. And it was a struggle, and it was interesting. We had probably about 20 people in the audience, and again, that issue was that land use policy, LU 4.2, that says you can only subdivide a previously subdivided property if you get a general plan amendment. And the staff understanding, of course, was that this was for purposes of tracking new units, for purposes of Charter Section 423. And of course, the community remembers this from the previous general plan and the fact that this was to protect hillsides, to prevent overdevelopment of areas. So, you know, we came down to the realization, look, we have to deal with all these issues. The Planning Commission did take a good hard look at it, and in the end essentially concluded, or it seemed to be a consensus, that if there was a property that could be subdivided for which they could support a general plan amendment, it would have been this one, save for the circumstances under which this application went forward, being that it had been submitted once over a year ago, the neighbors objected, it was withdrawn, some things including what some refer to as a spike fence went up blocking public views from the right-of-way, and the Planning Commission felt that it was incumbent upon the applicant to put more time and effort into revising the dwelling units to mollify the neighbors and meet their concerns rather than coming to the Planning Commission and expecting the Planning Commission to direct changes. So in the end, on a 6-1 vote, they decided that the amendment should not be sent forward to the City Council, so it just died there. It can be appealed within 14 days, and as of this morning, it had not been, but stay tuned on that one.
What's the size of that lot?
33,000 and change.
One of the larger lots on the west side of the bay.
Okay, item number 4, local coastal plan amendment. Again, you'll be seeing this on March 27th. This is to bring the coastal land use plan into conformity with the new general plan, land use categories. And lastly, a zoning code amendment initiation. Most of this was kind of a, let's hurry up and get this done and not wait for the update for the entire for the entire zoning ordinance, so we can get a lot of the items off the agenda for the zoning administrator and the modifications committee. Fireplaces in side yards, where barbecue grills go, trellises, the kinds of things are routinely being approved. We realize we can take a lot of the staff time out of that zoning administrator position if we just go ahead and make these legal by right. We've also included some of the previous council requests for screening of mechanical equipment on rooftops. And that's basically it. You'll be seeing that in another month or so.
Yeah, speaking of which, I've seen more air conditioning units go up on commercial rooftops. I'd like to see that ordinance.
That will be coming forward as fast as we can.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions of Dave? Okay. Thank you, Dave. I guess our last item for the night, item number 22 under current business, fiscal year 2007-2008 budget.
Mr. Mayor, I've had some city council people ask me about the budget process and also how we handled certain issues, and I thought this would be a good opportunity, since I'm meeting with department heads and reviewing their budget submittals and also their items that fall outside of the budget parameters that were given them, to provide you some information so that the city council can provide feedback to myself and Dennis Danner before we get started on what is a very laborious process next week, meeting with all of the departments. So I've asked Dennis and his staff to prepare a PowerPoint presentation talking a little bit about the process, but also talking about some of the budget numbers. And I'm going to let him provide that PowerPoint. I do apologize for not allowing you to see it in advance. Unfortunately, both Dennis and myself and Dick Kurth were gone all of last week. So what you see has really been put together over the last 2 days. Dennis, do you want to do it from there, or do you want to do it from Sharon's?
I'll do it from here,
Okay.
if you don't mind. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I, too, apologize that I didn't get this to you sooner. I know you like to see things in advance, but we're working on this until 3:30 this afternoon. So, and I placed copies in front of you, so hopefully you can follow along with me. Real quickly, this is our budget process. I know we've talked about this before, especially at the Finance Committee meeting, but our process begins back in November with financial forecasting. We're in this time frame right now, February, March, where the budgets have been submitted to the department, the city manager, and we're beginning that review next week, as Homer mentioned. You will receive the budget at the end of April, early May, and begin review of that document, and then adopt public hearing and adoption in June. Again, I know this is old information for some of you, but this is how we budget revenues. Thank you, Homer. We budget revenues based upon known factors, historical analysis, state and county issues that we're aware of, the economy, economic development, growth expectations, and most importantly, department input. Expenditures, we budget all personnel within the Administrative Services Department based upon the full complement of staff. Required costs are based on known or estimated costs, primarily approved contracts, utilities, equipment, etc. And then we have controllable costs that are based on department justification and historical trends. The budget as submitted that we've compiled over the last couple of weeks shows a total overall increase of 3%. The biggest portion of that, of course, and I'm just speaking of general fund, by the way. The largest portion of that is, of course, salaries and benefits, makes up 73.4% of the budget, same as in the current fiscal year. We're seeing a 2.9% increase, and I'll talk about these increases in more detail in a second, but it's all approved contracts that we know about, as well as I mentioned, a full complement of staff, merit increases, et cetera. We're seeing a 4.5% increase in maintenance and operations. I'll speak about that a little bit further. And a small decrease, it's a big percentage-wise, but a small decrease in our capital improvement program. Quickly, some of the items that are included and excluded in this budget that you'll be receiving. Included, of course, is all approved positions, step increases, approved reclassifications, ceiling adjustments, which I'll go into in a little more detail, and known MOU increases. As you know, Council just recently approved police contracts, so that's factored in there for a full 12 months. We currently have contracts with fire and fire management that expire in December 31st, so they're in there for 6 months. And all those are included in the submitted budget. What is excluded is salary savings. MOU increase is not yet negotiated, and I have a chart for that. And then any supplemental requests that departments submit over and above their baseline budget. Talk a minute about ceiling adjustments. Budget ceilings represent the maximum amount a department may submit for consideration. Budget ceilings are derived from the prior year's operating budget, plus or minus any approved adjustments. Ceiling adjustments primarily represent council-approved bargaining unit MOUs and scheduled contract adjustments. Upward adjustments are based on newly approved initiatives and contractual obligations, and downward adjustments are based on previously approved but one-time or short-term initiatives. In this year's 2007-2008 budget ceiling adjustments, I just want to give you some examples of
what we approved at the staff level. We saw utility, electrical, and telephone charge increases of $79,000. That's over all departments. Vehicle maintenance and replacement, an increase of $441,000. Fuel or gasoline, $156,000. General plan implementation, I believe that this is at the direction of the City Council, $150,000. And then we had a lot of contract increases that a lot of contracts have a CPI adjustment built into them. Refuse collection, Newport Coast, et cetera, and that totaled $327,000. I've got a full list of those if you'd like to see them. Talk a minute about decreases. Last year, the City Council, as part of the budget checklist, if you will, approved a matching grant for the Corona Del Mar pool. So that was a one-time expenditure. We took that out of the space budget. We've ended computer and copier lease agreements. We're paying cash for those now. It's more fiscally responsible. Short-term contracts for cost allocation study, that was included in my own budget last year at $100,000. We're performing that now. We don't have to do it again, hopefully. We took that out of the budget. Removal one-time appropriations related to the centennial, and of course, we don't think there are going to be any elections held in 2008. I mentioned earlier the largest part of the general fund budget, of course, is salaries and benefits. I put this chart up here just for your information so you can see that these are the labor organizations that we have within the city. PEA, PMS, Police Employees Association, Police Management, of course, they just recently approved, you just recently approved an increase for them. So in the current budget, we had adjusted upwards 3%. On July 1st, 2007, there will be another 4% increase. By the way, this will be annualized, so it's 3% for 12 months and then the additional 4%. But what is unknown, we don't have
3% for 6 months, I mean.
In the current budget.
Yeah.
But it's got to be annualized for the entire next year. So they received a 3% increase on January 1st, 2007, which is for half a year.
For 6 months, they're going to get 3%, and then they're going to get another 4%.
Correct. But you also have to factor in the 3% for a full 12 months next year as well.
Okay.
That's what I tried to say. But we don't have contracts with, you can see CEA, which is the City Employees Association, expires on June 30th. Professional and technical employees, expires on June 30th. And the League expires on June 30th. And key and management employees, they don't really have a contract, but they generally follow along with CEA or ProfTech. So if you add these numbers up, 32% of the budget is fixed for the next fiscal year, but which means 68% is still under negotiations. I've shown you this chart before. I know I've shown it to the Finance Committee. These are budget amendments that we approved last year and this year, and then they total over $20 million, and they're for extraordinary projects, something you don't do all the time, but certainly needed done. Corona Del Mar State Beach improvements, Sunset Ridge Park, Santa Ana Heights Fire Station, you can read them, Back Bay Sign, et cetera, et cetera. All those special projects, we wrote budget amendments for over $20 million over the last 2 fiscal years.
Now, with Santa Ana Heights, there's a fire station, there's a good chance we'll get our money back from the county?
There's a good chance.
There's a chance. Let's not overrate our chance.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, Homer promised it. If we don't get it from the county, we're going to get it from Homer.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
I have a couple of charts. I've only got a few left. I don't want to belabor this issue, but typically we budget $5 million in capital projects. What you've seen over the last couple of years is extraordinary, and we've gone ahead and funded capital projects at the $5 million level in this next budget proposal. This is a chart that we previously showed to the Finance Committee, and what I did was update it for the budget year. And historically, the green line represents revenues, and if you're doing things right, revenues should exceed your expenditures. In the few cases where they don't, like especially last year, it's because of those extraordinary capital projects that were approved. But typically, revenues have been exceeding expenditures for the last 15 years or so. And it's just a breakdown. You can see what makes up this. The expenditure line is broken down between salaries and benefits, M&O, and CIP. Again, another chart that we simply updated for the budget year 2007-2008. This shows a trend of our expenditures by function, this being public safety and the other public works and the other functions down here. So you can see how it's been growing over time. This spike right here is what I've mentioned to you about the capital improvements. General fund reserves, you can see that they fell in the current fiscal year due to those capital projects, but we're climbing again in the new budget year. And what makes that up is the way the budgets are submitted at this point, we have an operating surplus of approximately $3 million. There's also council policies that require any revenues generated from individual sources be placed into reserve. That's recreation, senior citizen site, park and lieu fees is a big one of $763,000, off-street parking, neighborhood enhancement, etc. So, but you can see our contingency reserve is remaining flat. Our PERS reserve is remaining flat. Our capital improvement reserve is remaining flat. It's growing in those specified council policy reserves. This is simply the same chart as the previous one, but it includes our workers' compensation and general liability reserves. Again, they're growing. It's growing simply because of the operating surplus and those other things I mentioned. And finally, this is my last slide, and I know it's an important one, at least it was to the Finance Committee. And this is showing our growth over, I had to take 1 year off to get it to fit on the chart. It starts at 2000, but I hid that column, so it starts with 2001, but it includes the budget year. And these are the same numbers that you saw on a previous chart. Salaries and benefits are growing about almost $3 million. Maintenance, operation, and capital is actually decreasing because of a lot of one-time expenditures in the current fiscal year, including the, I've got a list of them, but it includes the Centennial and other expenditures such as that. And again, the $5 million that we're dedicating for the capital improvement program. So you really have to exclude CIP to get a sense of how the operation is growing. But because of, it's really, if you exclude the capital improvement program, it's relatively flat from 1 year to the next. Salaries and benefits increasing $3 million, but maintenance, operation, capital decreasing about $3 million. And that's really what I wanted to provide for you today. Again, we didn't have a lot of time to put this presentation together, but I thought it would give you some sense of where we're at in the process and what we're trying to accomplish. If I may, I'll go back to this one chart. Near the beginning. This is the one where we're showing a 3% overall increase in the budget as submitted. Again, I'll repeat that it does not include contract amendments for those associations that have not yet settled, nor does it include any supplemental requests by the departments.
Or City Council.
Or City Council. And that really is what concludes my presentation. I'm just prepared to answer questions you may have.
If a City Council member has various different projects that they feel they would like to see in next year's budget, who do they contact as far as trying to make that known so that they can be considered in the overall process?
Mr. Webb, Councilman Webb, are you referring specifically to capital improvement programs?
Right.
I would contact Steve Batum.
Okay.
Or the city manager, of course.
Just
Or the city manager.
provide a little bit of background on the issue, and I know Mayor Rosansky, as part of your mayoral platform, you've talked about fiscal responsibility and being fiscally prudent. And so I think the Finance Committee has really taken that as a cue to look at some of the issues. And certainly in looking at our revenues, I mean, we've had extraordinary growth. You look at the property values continue to increase. We also have rapidly increasing sales tax because of our retail market. We've seen property tax double in 5 years. General fund revenues gone from $96 million to $148 million. And then when taking a look at expenses, it seemed as if they were keeping pace with our revenues, and we're looking at growth of 8-9% per year. And so we began to question the appropriateness of those expenses continuing to grow. It seems like certain municipal functions, issuing dog licenses, those types of things should be pretty flat, or water billing when we take on new areas and there's a different water district. So it was determined to look at this and study this at the Finance Committee level, and so fact-finding is underway to try to sort out the core expenses from what's left over for discretionary spending. And we have a couple of finance majors, Councilman Curry, Councilman Henn, who are really well suited to help us along in terms of articulating in financial terms what we're going to be looking at as far as short term, and then perhaps also the long term. And the whole idea of wanting to try to flatten out these expenses is so that we'd have more money for discretionary spending. Discretionary spending is important to us because we're able to address important community needs, such as improving ball fields, traffic signal synchronization, bulkheads, and so on. And although there's $5 million in CIP, when you look at from 2002 to 2007, there's been $50 million more in revenue. So we're still looking at, I think there'd probably be, quite a bit of it being in the expense growth. And also, I think Council wanting to embark on policy initiatives, be it refurbishing senior centers and so on, as well as being good fiscal managers and returning tax dollars by way of lasting improvements. And so we're faced with, kind of the long-term, how do we treat this, but certainly in terms of this year's budget, what guidance might we want to give? And I think in that regard, we want it to be very much a consensus kind of a guidance, and I'd turn it over to really throw it out there to the council members in terms of, where you might want to go with this.
Councilman Henn?
Yeah, I think the key issue, as Councilwoman Daigle mentioned, is that we have a collective responsibility, staff and the council, actually, to try to provide a services delivery system to our residents that minimizes the core cost of delivering the services that they need. And to do that over time such that this wonderful experience that we've had of strong revenue growth can maximize that gap between delivery of core services and our revenue. And so we're structuring our thoughts, I guess, at the Finance Committee level as to how to best go about determining where do we stand as a city in terms of our efficiency of delivering services, our core efficiencies, who are the leading role models that we might see out there, either in total or in certain departments, and what are the major initiatives that we might have a look at in order to satisfy ourselves that we are, in fact, delivering these core services at our most efficient, in our most efficient way. That process will take a little while because it has to rely upon objective fact-finding, agreement on metrics, and research about what's the best thing to do. In the meantime, we do have a current year budget, and the thing that was most striking to me in looking at the prior information was this very narrow gap between expenses and revenue. And when I say expenses, I want to get at a definition of core expenses. Core expenses would exclude CIP expenditures. They would exclude unusual items like the general election. And they probably should exclude discretionary additions to our reserves, because we should probably have a separate discussion of that, since it is discretionary. So I really think it's important that we get to this definition of core expenses that we can, for now, agree upon and measure our progress against in the current budget cycle. And, you know, the idea is to, again, widen that gap, or at least to be able to begin to have impact on that gap in the current budget year, recognizing that we don't have great overall guidance, structural guidance. The difficulty that we have, and by the way, I want to make it really clear, I have uniformly met hardworking, well-directed people in the city staff and that are trying to do the right thing every day. I have no doubt of that at all. The budget process that we have today, though, basically embeds prior practice as the starting point. You do make a good effort to scrub out unusual things, plus and minus, and I appreciate that. But nevertheless, what we're left with is basically embedding prior practice. And it's been my experience over time, when we do that for a long period of time, we embed things that we shouldn't, perhaps. And it's because we're just in the current budget cycle, it's hard to get at those embedded practices. That's what the longer-term process should be directed at. In the current budget cycle, you know, we've been looking at a 4-year compound annual growth rate of revenues in the range of 9% for the last 4 years. That's great revenue growth. We've been looking at compound growth rate in core expenses, at least roughly speaking, core expenses, excluding CIP and basically excluding CIP, general fund expenses, a compound growth rate of 8.4%. That's the number that is troublesome for me, and that I would like for us to be able to show progress against in the current budget cycle to the greatest extent possible. My initial thought along those lines was maybe we should try to achieve a target somewhere in the range of an inflationary increase, which you can pick the number, would be somewhere between 3 and 4%. From the chart that you have on the screen there, given the fact that we're already at 3%, and without the ability to really dig into the total detail, I'll just accept that it's 3%, and then we've still got some things that we haven't included. So it's likely that it's going to be hard to get to an inflationary increase for the current budget year. I am hopeful, though, that in the process of your budget discussions, you can challenge staff to have a view of their expenses that don't necessarily embed prior practice. Let's see if we can think of some ways to be more efficient in the short run, some low-hanging fruit perhaps. These kinds of things, and really these ideas come from the people that do the jobs most of the time, and so the right thing to do is ask them how they think they might be more efficient in the short run. And then perhaps we can organize a process in the longer run that will also solicit their views of more fundamental changes that can't be done right away. But I guess in looking at this, my guidance to you would be, let's minimize that number of core expenses. Let's agree on a definition of core expenses that we can look at in our first budget council budget review that gives us a view of what that core expense increase is, and then what the other items that would come on top of that would be. And I would hope we can get that core expense growth number down as close to 4% as we can. I don't know what the right answer for that is, but I think we need to challenge ourselves to be as creative as we can in the short run so that we can demonstrate some progress against our budget and set a stage for this longer-term process that may yield improved results.
I'm sorry, Councilman Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Dick, thank you for that presentation, because one of the things I've been impressed by is the fact that Dennis, you and Dick Kurth are two of the most conservative financial managers on the planet, and we are blessed to have you with the city. And to pick up on the comments that Councilmember Daigle and Councilmember Hinn said, I see this sort of the same way, but with a little bit different take. We're approaching a time of great generational change in terms of our facilities that need to be replaced and updated and modernized to meet a new term of service in our community. And that's going to be an expensive proposition, but it's one that has to be addressed so that we can leave a legacy for the next 3 generations of Newport residents of appropriate state-of-the-art facilities. We're also going to see a generational change in our workforce as the baby boomer generation retires, including many of our department managers, and that's going to give us the opportunity to take a clean sheet of paper and redesign, in some cases, how we deliver services, or at least to think about how we deliver services. And I think that is our opportunity, as Councilmember Hinn alluded, to look at how we've approached things in the past and perhaps, where appropriate, use new technologies and new applications and new servicing agreements to approach them differently in the future. And I think that's an exciting challenge that we as a city face to leave a legacy of a better, more functioning city going forward. And so I look forward to that challenge, and I just add my voice to my colleagues who obviously take this very seriously as our job on the City Council to ensure a continued solid fiscal footing for our community.
Councilmember Selich?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in support of the approach that Councilwoman Daigle and Councilmember Hinn have suggested here. And I really like focusing in on these core expenses, but I think one of the things we have to be careful to identify is it seems to me that we're getting hit with a lot of mandatory things by other agencies, outside agencies, things that the city has to do that we haven't had to do before. And so within the context of that, we have to be able to take that into account, because it just seems every year that local governments get hit with more and more programs or regulations we have to administer from state and federal agencies that they don't seem to care what it costs for local government to take on those burdens, and they just dump them on us, and we have to respond to them. And so I think somehow we have to be able to identify that and separate it out somehow and take it into consideration as we look at this core expense growth. And then just one question in detail I can't help asking. On this zoning code rewrite, is that an operational expense, or is that a capital improvement expense?
Be operational.
Okay, because that's going to be an aberration. It's going to be a very, very expensive proposition. You know, we're talking about in the neighborhood of $450,000 to do this rewrite.
Well, we were figuring you would do that in your spare time.
And some of the numbers you saw, I mean, $4 million for the general plan is an operational expense. That isn't a CIP. So some of those extraordinary expenses, you know, are in there. They are one-time, and hopefully not to be repeated, but those kind of things would be operational.
No, you have to update your general plan every 5 years.
Mr. Mayor, could I just say
Sure.
something, kind of getting back to what Councilman Keith said? You know, last year there was a committee that the council formed, and that was to look at how the city could finance its facility needs. And, you know, one of the recommendations that came out of that came to the city council, and the city council kind of blessed it, was, you know, if we put away $3 million a year, well, maybe $3 million isn't the right number, but this budget does put away $3 million to add to the CIP reserve, does it not, Dennis?
The current, the current year budget does, yes.
Thank you. Anyone else want to make a comment? I guess I'll just finish up. You know, I too, obviously the city has to be fiscally responsible with the money that we bring in. When you do come back to us, you know, please make sure that you, and I'm sure you will, but I mean, there's growth in expenditures, but we also have to kind of balance it against growth in services, that we always want to provide the highest and best services to our residents. I know, for instance, like this year, we're going to have Newport Coast Community Center come online. I'm sure there's an expense associated with that won't be reflected in prior year budgets, which would, I guess, tend to skew the numbers unless you pushed it back into those previous figures or broke it out of maybe the core number that you're talking about. So, certainly when we look at these numbers, I'd like to have that information. What, is it that we're just paying more for the same services, or we're actually paying more but we're providing more services? And so, please make sure that you're sensitive to that when you provide the information in the future.
Just one more quick comment. Sure. I think my comments are directed collectively at all of us in the room, actually. This process is a matter of discipline for us all to observe, including the council as well as staff. So I don't mean for the focus to be on staff here. I mean, this is something that we all have to be very cognizant of and observe along the way. So.
And Councilman Hinn, one thing I usually say, and maybe I haven't said to this city council, is that the ultimate budget is the council's budget. So you need to feel comfortable what that budget looks like, because it's basically says what your priorities are. So giving me this direction, certainly does help. Thank you.
Did Councilman Hinn want to make a motion, or how do we then communicate that direction?
I'm not sure that we need a motion in this respect. I don't think it's appropriate to try and mandate some sort of a hard limit here. I don't think we know enough to do that. I think we've conveyed the direction we want to move in, and that we do want to see some meaningful progress, if at all possible here. So.
Okay, so I think we've given staff a little bit of direction on that. That's going to conclude our meeting. I believe Councilman Curry wanted to adjourn the meeting in the honor of somebody, so I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And with the indulgence of my colleagues, 10 years ago, my mother, Jimmy Margaret Davis, passed away, and had Mom lived, today would have been her 80th birthday and 58th anniversary. There's no doubt that without her, I would not have been up here today. So with your indulgence, I'd like to ask that we adjourn in honor of my mother, Jimmy Margaret Davis.
So done. Thank you all. Sorry. Last thing, motions for actually reconsideration of an action taken tonight or a previous action at last meeting. Anybody want to make a motion for reconsideration? Okay, we will adjourn to, what is it, Saturday the
24th at 8:30.
At 8:30 at the Newport Beach Main Library in Fashion Island. Thank you.
Woo-hoo.